They thought she was alone. The late afternoon light spills across the sidewalk in soft gold, the kind that makes everything look warmer than it really is. But the air carries something colder, something unseen. As Clara Whitmore steps quietly out of the cafe, her coat simple, her posture calm, her eyes lowered not in fear, but in habit, like someone who has learned the cost of being noticed. And across the street, laughter rises too loud, too sharp, cutting through the gentle hum of passing cars and distant voices. Derek Vaughn leans against a polished black truck, surrounded by people who mirror his confidence, their smiles quick, their eyes scanning for weakness. And when Clara passes, he notices, not because she stands out, but because she doesn't. And that, to him, is reason enough. Hey, he calls, casual, careless, as if the world bends to his voice. Clara pauses, just for a second. The kind of pause that says she's deciding whether silence will protect her or cost her more. The breeze shifts, carrying the faint scent of roasted coffee and something metallic, distant, and Derek steps closer, his shoes scraping lightly against concrete. You dropped something, he says, though nothing has fallen yet, and the others laugh before the moment even lands. Clara's fingers tighten slightly around the strap of her worn bag, her breath steady, controlled, like someone who has practiced staying small, invisible. But the world doesn't always allow that. A sudden movement, a careless bump, and her bag slips, falling to the ground with a soft thud, the contents spilling just enough to draw attention, not enough to matter, except for one thing. A thin chain sliding free, catching the light as it hits the pavement, a worn dog tag, edges softened by time, resting between them. And for a moment, everything stills, though no one notices why. Derek glances down, unimpressed, nudging it slightly with the tip of his shoe, as if it's nothing more than scrap metal. You should keep better track of your junk, he mutters, laughter following like an echo. But Clara doesn't respond. She kneels slowly, carefully, as if the ground itself deserves respect, her fingers hovering just above the tag, not touching it yet. Not until she knows it's still there, still real. And somewhere behind them, a sound emerges, soft at first, almost lost in the noise of the street. The steady rhythm of paws against pavement, unhurried, deliberate. And when it stops, no bark follows, no sudden movement, just silence, the kind that presses against the edges of a moment until it can no longer be ignored. And one by one, the laughter fades, not completely, but enough to make space for something else, something watching, something waiting. And Clara's hand finally closes around the dog tag, her grip gentle, reverent, as if holding more than metal, as if holding a memory that refuses to be forgotten. While just a few feet away, unseen by most, a German shepherd stands still, eyes fixed, not on the crowd, not on the noise, but on that single, worn piece of steel gleaming faintly in the dying light. The dog does not move closer, not yet. It stands with a stillness that feels older than the street, older than the noise, its chest rising slow, controlled, amber eyes locked onto Clara's hand as she lifts the tag from the pavement. And something in the air shifts, subtle but real, like the moment before a storm decides whether it will break or pass. Derek notices it too, not the meaning, only the interruption, and that alone irritates him. What is that, your pet now? He says, glancing at the dog with a smirk that does not quite land the way it did a moment ago. Because the animal does not react the way most would. It does not flinch, does not retreat. It simply watches. And that kind of calm unsettles people who are used to control. Clara rises slowly, brushing a bit of dust from her coat, the chain now wrapped gently around her fingers, her movements careful, deliberate, as if every second matters, as if rushing would mean losing something invisible but important. The dog takes one step forward, then stops again, close enough now that the light catches the faint scars along its flank, old marks, healed but not forgotten, and Clara sees them, just for a second, her eyes lifting to meet the dog's, and in that brief exchange, something passes between them, something quiet and unspoken. Derek exhales sharply, forcing a laugh that comes out thinner than before. It is just a stray, he says, more to the people behind him than to Clara, as if he needs them to agree, as if he needs the moment to shrink back into something simple, manageable. But the street does not return to normal, not quite. The breeze slows, the distant hum of traffic feels farther away, and the dog lowers its head slightly, not in submission, but in recognition, its nose twitching once, twice, drawing in the scent of the metal, the leather, the faint trace of something long gone but not erased. Clara's grip tightens just a fraction, and she pulls the tag closer to her chest, instinctively, protectively, and for the first time, her voice comes, soft but steady. "It is not yours to touch," she says, not looking at Derek, not needing to, and the words do not carry anger, only certainty. The kind that does not ask permission. Derek's smile fades at the edges, just enough to show the crack beneath it. He shifts his weight, glancing again at the dog, then back at Clara, and something about the way she stands now feels different, not louder, not stronger in the way people expect, but grounded, like someone who has already endured more than this moment could offer. The dog steps closer again, this time without stopping, until it stands just beside Clara, close enough that its shoulder brushes lightly against her leg, and it exhales a low, quiet breath, as if settling into place it has been searching for, and Clara does not step away, does not hesitate. Her hand lowers slowly, resting just above the dog's head, not quite touching, as if asking permission in a language only the two of them understand, and around them, the small circle of onlookers grows quieter, the earlier laughter dissolving into something uncertain, because whatever this is, it does not feel like a scene anymore. It feels like something being remembered, something returning, and Derek, for the first time, does not speak immediately, because the space between him and that woman now feels wider than the street itself, and he cannot quite explain why it happens in a heartbeat that feels stretched thin, like time itself is holding its breath. Derek clears his throat and steps forward again, forcing control back into his voice. "You think this is some kind of moment," he says, gesturing loosely, but his eyes keep drifting back to the dog, because it has not looked away once, not from Clara, not from the tag. And that kind of focus feels wrong in a place like this, too precise, too intentional. Clara does not answer him. She kneels again, slower this time, and now her hand gently touches the dog's head, fingers brushing through coarse fur warmed by the late sun. The dog closes its eyes just briefly, not in submission, but in recognition, as if confirming something it has been searching for across miles, across years, and when it exhales, it is deeper now, steadier, like a memory settling into place. The chain in Clara's hand glints again, and as it shifts, the metal catches more than light. It carries a scent, faint but unmistakable to the one who knows how to listen. The dog leans in slightly, nose hovering near the tag, and a soft sound escapes its throat. Not a bark, not a growl, something lower, almost like a whisper shaped into breath. Clara's eyes close for just a second when she hears it, and when they open again, there is something different there, not fear, not even caution, but recognition, the kind that arrives quietly and changes everything without asking permission. Derek scoffs, louder now, trying to pull the moment back into something he understands. "It is just a piece of metal," he says, but his words fall flat, because even the people behind him are no longer laughing. Their attention has shifted, drawn toward the stillness that now defines the center of the street. A woman across the sidewalk lowers her phone slowly, unsure whether to keep recording or simply watch. A car idles at the curb, the driver no longer honking, just waiting, as if interrupting now would break something fragile. Clara rises again, but this time she does not step back. She stands her ground, the dog beside her matching her stillness, shoulder aligned with her leg, a quiet kind of partnership forming without introduction. She wraps the chain once around her fingers, holding the tag against her palm, and for the first time, she looks directly at Derek, not with anger, not with defiance, but with a calm that feels heavier than both. "You should leave," she says, her voice low, even, carrying just enough to reach him without needing to rise. Derek opens his mouth to respond, but nothing comes immediately, because the space between them no longer feels like his to control. It feels measured, observed, and somewhere in that space, the dog shifts its weight, slightly, not forward, not aggressive, just enough to remind everyone present that it is there, fully aware, fully present. And then, from down the street, a new sound begins to emerge, faint at first, the low rumble of an engine approaching, steady, unhurried, growing louder with each passing second, the kind of sound that belongs to something purposeful, something that does not rush because it does not need to. And the dog hears it before anyone else does, its ears lifting, head turning slightly toward the direction of the sound. And in that small movement, something changes again, something unseen but undeniable, as if whatever story is unfolding here is about to be witnessed by someone who already knows how it ends. The engine's sound grows closer, steady and low, not rushed, not uncertain, the kind of presence that does not need to announce itself because it is already known. And as it rolls into view, a dark green truck slows along the curb, tires whispering against the pavement. The door opens with a quiet, deliberate click, and boots meet the ground, firm but unhurried. Ethan Cole steps out like a man who has learned to measure every step, every breath, his posture straight, his eyes scanning once, taking in the scene without asking a single question. And the air seems to shift again, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough that the space tightens, focuses. Derek turns toward him instinctively, as if sensing something he cannot name, his confidence flickering just for a fraction of a second before he straightens his shoulders, trying to reclaim ground that no longer feels entirely his. Ethan does not look at him first. He looks at the dog, and the moment stretches. Because the dog has already turned, already recognized him, its body shifting in a way that is subtle but undeniable, ears forward, posture alert, not tense, but aware. And then the dog moves, not running, not rushing, just stepping forward with quiet certainty until it stands a few feet from Ethan, their eyes meeting in a silence that carries more history than words could hold. Ethan exhales slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if something long held inside him has just settled. "Hey, buddy," he says, voice low, steady, familiar, and the dog responds not with sound, but with a slight lowering of its head, a soft shift of weight, like a soldier acknowledging someone it trusts. And only then does Ethan look past the dog, his gaze landing on Clara, and everything in his expression changes, not sharply, not dramatically, but deeply, like recognition unfolding layer by layer. His eyes move to her hand, to the chain wrapped around her fingers, to the worn tag pressed against her palm. And, for a moment, he does not move at all, because the world has narrowed to that single detail, that single piece of metal catching the last light of the day. Derek steps forward again, forcing his voice into the space. "Is there a problem here?" he asks, louder than necessary, trying to pull attention back to himself. But Ethan does not respond immediately. He takes one step closer instead, slow, deliberate, his boots sounding heavier now against the quiet street. And when he finally speaks, his voice is calm, controlled, but carrying something beneath it that does not need volume to be felt. "Where did you get that?" he asks, not to Derek, not to anyone else, only to Clara. And Clara meets his gaze without hesitation, her expression steady, her grip on the tag unwavering. "It was never lost," she says softly, and the words settle into the air with a weight that shifts everything. Ethan's jaw tightens slightly, not in anger, but in something closer to memory. His eyes flicker once more, to the dog, then back to Clara, and for the first time since he arrived, the faintest trace of emotion breaks through his composure, something like recognition, something like relief, and behind him, the world remains still, because whatever is unfolding now no longer belongs to the crowd. It belongs to the past catching up with the present, and Derek, standing just a few feet away, realizes he is no longer at the center of it. The silence holds longer than anyone expects, stretching thin between breath and memory, and Ethan takes another step closer, his eyes never leaving the tag in Clara's hand, the world around them fading into something distant and unimportant, like sound underwater. The dog shifts slightly, positioning itself between them, but not as a barrier, more like a bridge, something connecting two points that have not touched in years. Clara studies Ethan for a moment, not searching for recognition, but confirming it, and when she speaks again, her voice carries that same quiet certainty. "He told me someone would come back for it one day," she says, her thumb brushing lightly over the worn edges of the metal. And Ethan's breath catches just enough to be felt, but not heard, because he knows exactly who she means without needing the name. The memory arriving not as a picture, but as a feeling, the weight of sand in his boots, the heat of a distant horizon, a voice beside him that never raised but never failed. Derek shifts again. Uneasy now, his earlier confidence unraveling in small, almost invisible threads. "Look, I do not know what this is, but you are making a scene," he says, trying to reassert control, but even he can hear the difference in his tone. Less command, more question, and no one answers him. Not the crowd, not Clara, not Ethan, because whatever mattered before no longer fits into this moment. Ethan finally stops just a few feet from Clara, close enough now to see the fine lines of time on the tag, the faint scratches that only come from years of being carried, not displayed, and his voice, when it comes, is softer now, stripped of everything except truth. His name was Daniel Hayes, he says, not asking, not guessing, just stating what he knows in his bones, and Clara nods once, slow and steady. "He said you would remember," she replies, and something inside Ethan shifts, something heavy and long buried rising just enough to be felt. Again, not as pain, but as something closer to gratitude. The dog lowers itself to the ground beside Clara, resting but alert, its eyes moving between them as if guarding the space where past and present meet. A faint breeze passes through, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain, and Ethan reaches out, slowly, not for the tag yet, but for the space between them, as if asking permission without words. Clara watches his hand, then gently loosens her grip on the chain, letting the tag rest in her open palm, offering but not surrendering, because this is not about giving something away, it is about returning something that was never hers to keep. Derek exhales sharply, frustrated, confused, out of place in a moment he cannot control or understand, and for the first time, he takes a step back, not forced, not told, just instinct, because the center of gravity has shifted and he no longer belongs there. Ethan's fingers finally touch the edge of the tag, light, careful, as if it might disappear if held too tightly, and when he does, the dog lets out a quiet breath, almost like a release, as if something unfinished has just begun to find its way home for a moment. Neither of them moves, not Clara, not Ethan, not even the dog, as if the world itself has agreed to pause, and the tag rests between their hands, suspended in a quiet exchange that carries more weight than anyone watching can understand. Ethan's fingers close gently around the metal, not pulling it away, just holding it alongside her, sharing the space, sharing the memory, and his voice, when it finally returns, is softer than before, almost like he is speaking to someone who is no longer there. He used to say it was not about coming back, he murmurs, eyes fixed on the worn surface. It was about making sure someone else could. Clara listens without interrupting, her gaze steady, her posture unchanged, as if she has heard these words before in a different voice, in a different place, and the dog shifts closer, lowering its head until it rests lightly against Clara's leg, grounding her, anchoring the moment. Ethan exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries years with it, and then he looks up at her fully, really seeing her now, not as a stranger, but as someone who has been carrying a piece of his past without asking for anything in return. "You kept this all this time," he says, not as a question, but as a realization, and Clara nods once, her expression calm, but her eyes reflecting something deeper, something earned. "Someone had to remember him," she replies, and the words settle into the space like something sacred, not dramatic, not loud, just true. Behind them, the small crowd shifts again, but no one speaks, no one laughs, because whatever this is has moved beyond curiosity into something they do not want to disturb. Derek stands a few steps back now, arms crossing loosely as if trying to reclaim some version of himself. But even he can feel it, the shift, the loss of control, the realization that this moment is not his to shape, and for the first time, he looks uncertain, not threatened, just irrelevant. Ethan finally lifts the tag slightly, turning it in the light, the engraved name catching the fading sun, and for a brief second, the past feels close enough to touch, close enough to hear, and then he does something small, almost unnoticeable. He presses the tag back into Clara's hand, not taking it, not claiming it, but returning it, as if understanding that some things are not meant to be retrieved, only honored. Clara's fingers close around it again, slower this time, with a different kind of weight, not burden, but purpose, and the dog lets out a quiet breath, a soft exhale that feels like the end of something long unfinished. The breeze picks up slightly, carrying the scent of evening, cooler now, calmer, and Ethan steps back half a pace, not leaving, just giving space. His eyes still on Clara, but no longer searching, no longer questioning, just acknowledging. And in that quiet exchange, without words, without gestures, something settles between them. Something that does not need to be explained, because it has already been understood. The street does not return to noise right away. It lingers in that quiet space where something meaningful has just passed, like the echo of a bell no one saw ring. Clara's hand closes around the tag again. But now it rests differently in her palm, not as something carried alone, but as something shared, understood, and the dog lifts its head slightly, eyes moving between her and Ethan, as if confirming that the distance between them has changed in a way that cannot be undone. Ethan shifts his weight, his posture easing just enough to show that whatever tension he carried into this moment has begun to settle, and when he speaks again, his voice is steadier, grounded. He used to talk about a place like this, he says, glancing briefly around the street, the quiet buildings, the fading light. Said if he ever made it back, he would find somewhere simple, somewhere people could forget the noise. Clara listens, her expression softening just a fraction, because she has heard that dream before, not as a plan, but as a promise spoken quietly under a sky far from home. He never stopped believing that, she replies, and the words carry a warmth that does not need to be explained. The dog shifts again, stepping forward just enough to stand between them once more, not separating, but linking, its presence steady, unwavering, and Ethan's gaze follows the movement, a faint, almost invisible smile touching the corner of his expression, the kind that comes not from joy, but from recognition of something that has endured. Behind them, the onlookers begin to move again, slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether it is safe to return to ordinary life. A phone lowers completely, a car pulls away without a sound. The world resuming but quieter now, more aware. Derek stands off to the side, his earlier posture gone, replaced by something uncertain, something smaller. He glances once more at Clara, then at Ethan, then at the dog, and for the first time, he does not speak, because there is nothing left for him to claim, nothing left for him to control, and he understands it without needing to admit it. He turns slightly, taking another step back, then another, until the space he once filled no longer belongs to him at all. Ethan watches him go, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with a calm acknowledgement that some things resolve themselves without force. Clara follows the movement briefly, then lets it go, her attention returning to the present, to the man in front of her, to the dog at her side, and the breeze shifts again. Cooler now, carrying the first hint of evening settling in. Ethan takes a small breath, then gestures gently toward the cafe behind her, not as an invitation, but as a possibility. You should not have to stand out here, he says quietly, and Clara considers it for a moment, her eyes moving from him to the door, then back again, and the dog sits down between them, calm, patient, as if it has already decided where it belongs. And in that quiet pause, something new begins, not loud, not declared, just present, like a path appearing where there was none before, waiting to be walked without promise, without certainty, but with trust. The cafe door creaks softly as it opens, the warm glow from inside spilling onto the sidewalk like a quiet invitation. And Clara steps forward first, not hesitating, not rushing, just moving with the same steady rhythm she has carried through everything. The dog rises immediately, falling into step beside her as if it has always belonged there, and Ethan follows half a step behind, not leading, not guarding, simply present. The bell above the door chimes once, light and clear, and inside, the air feels different, warmer, filled with the scent of coffee and something familiar, something grounding. The low hum of conversation resumes cautiously, people pretending not to stare, but unable to fully look away. Clara moves toward a small table near the window, her hand still loosely wrapped around the chain, and she sits with quiet grace, the kind that does not seek attention but inevitably draws it. The dog settles beside her chair, its body relaxed, but its eyes still attentive, tracking every movement in the room with calm precision. Ethan pauses for a moment before sitting across from her, his gaze briefly scanning the space, not out of suspicion, but out of habit, and then it returns to her, softer now, more open. The silence between them is not empty. It is full, layered with everything that has already been said without words. A server approaches slowly, unsure whether to interrupt, and Clara offers a small nod, a simple acknowledgement that brings the moment back into something ordinary. 2 cups of coffee are placed on the table, the steam rising gently, curling into the air like something unspoken. Ethan wraps his hands around the cup, but does not drink, not yet, his attention drawn again to the tag, now resting quietly against Clara's palm on the table. "He talked about you," he says after a moment, his voice low, careful, as if testing whether the memory will hold. Clara's eyes lift, meeting his, and there is no surprise there, only a quiet acceptance. "He said you were the one who never left anyone behind," she replies, and the words land softly, but they carry weight, the kind that settles deep. Ethan exhales slowly, a faint shake of his head following, not in denial, but in reflection. "He did not either," he says, almost to himself, and for a moment, the years fold in on themselves, the distance between then and now shrinking to something that can be held in a single breath. The dog shifts slightly, resting its head gently against Clara's knee, its eyes half closing, but its awareness never fading, and outside, the last light of the day begins to dim, the street growing quieter, calmer, as if the world itself is stepping back to give space to something that matters. Clara finally lifts the tag again, letting it catch the light from the window, her fingers tracing its edges with quiet care. "I did not keep it because I could not let go," she says softly, her voice steady, grounded. "I kept it because someone had to remember who he was." Ethan looks at her, really looks this time, and something in his expression softens completely, not guarded anymore, not distant, just present. "You did more than that," he says, and the words are simple, but they carry truth, and in that small space, with the quiet hum of the cafe around them and the steady presence of the dog at her side, something settles, something that feels less like an ending, and more like the beginning of understanding. The kind that does not need to be spoken to be real. The cafe settles into a quieter rhythm as evening leans in, the soft clink of cups and low murmurs weaving into a kind of background that no longer intrudes, and Clara sits with her hands resting lightly around the tag, no longer gripping it, no longer guarding it, just holding it the way one holds something understood. Ethan watches her for a moment, then finally takes a sip of his coffee, the warmth grounding him, bringing him fully into the present, and when he sets the cup down, his voice carries a different tone now, less weighted by memory, more shaped by purpose. "I looked for him," he says, not as a confession, but as something that has lived inside him for years. Clara does not interrupt. She listens the way she always has, fully, without needing to fill the space. "After that day, after everything, I thought if I could just find where he ended up, I could make sense of it." Ethan continues, his eyes drifting briefly to the window where the last of the daylight fades into a soft blue. But there were gaps, things that did not get recorded, things that just disappeared. Clara nods slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of the tag again. "He did not disappear," she says gently, and Ethan looks back at her, something in her certainty anchoring him. "He found his way here," she adds, her gaze steady, and for a moment, Ethan considers that, not as a metaphor, but as something real, something that has taken shape through time and quiet acts of memory. The dog shifts again, lifting its head slightly, its eyes moving to Ethan now, studying him with the same calm attention it gave Clara earlier, as if measuring, confirming, and Ethan notices a faint breath of recognition passing through him. "He trusted you," Clara says softly, and Ethan gives a small nod, not out of pride, but out of respect. "He trusted everyone until they proved him wrong," he replies, and the words carry both admiration and loss. The dog stands then, slowly, stepping around the table until it comes to Ethan's side, not hesitant, not unsure, just moving with quiet intention, and when it stops beside him, it looks up, holding his gaze, and for a second, nothing else exists, Not the cafe, not the people. Just that silent exchange, and Ethan lowers his hand, cautiously, not assuming, not claiming, and the dog leans into it, just slightly, enough to close the distance, enough to say what cannot be spoken. Clara watches this, her expression softening in a way it has not before, because this is not coincidence. This is recognition unfolding in real time, the kind that does not ask for explanation, the kind that simply is. Outside, a streetlight flickers on, casting a gentle glow through the window, and inside, the world feels smaller, more focused, as if everything unnecessary has fallen away. Ethan withdraws his hand slowly, not breaking the connection, just acknowledging it. And he looks back at Clara, something steady now in his expression, something resolved. He did not leave everything behind, he says quietly, glancing once more at the dog, then back at her, and Clara follows his gaze, her fingers tightening just slightly around the tag, not in fear, but in understanding, because she can feel it too now, that this is not just about what was carried, but about what has been found. And in the quiet space between them, something begins to take shape, something neither of them names, but both of them recognize as the next part of a story that has already been written in ways they are only beginning to see. The moment settles into something quieter, deeper, like a tide that has finally reached the shore after a long and unseen journey. Ethan leans back slightly in his chair, his eyes still on the dog, but now with a different kind of awareness, not just recognition, but responsibility, and the dog remains beside him, steady, grounded, as if it has already chosen its place without needing permission. Clara watches them both, her fingers resting lightly over the tag, and for the first time, she lets out a breath that feels unguarded, not heavy, not burdened, just real. He used to say that some bonds do not break, she says softly, her voice carrying the weight of something lived, not imagined. Ethan nods once, slow, thoughtful. He was right about that, he replies, and there is no hesitation in his voice now, only certainty shaped by everything that has led to this moment. Outside, the street has grown still, the occasional car passing like a distant reminder that the world continues, but inside, time feels different, slower, more intentional. The cafe lights hum faintly above them, casting a warm glow that softens the edges of everything. Clara looks down at the tag again, then carefully lifts it, turning it once more in the light, and then, after a brief pause, she reaches across the table, not offering it away, but placing it gently between them, on the surface where both can see it clearly, where it belongs not to one, but to the memory they now share. Ethan follows the movement, his gaze steady, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, because the silence itself has become enough. The dog shifts slightly, lowering itself to rest beside Ethan's chair now, its body relaxed, its breathing even, as if it has found what it was searching for without needing to move another inch. Clara studies the dog for a moment, then looks back at Ethan, her expression calm but certain. "It followed me for 3 days, she says, her tone gentle, almost reflective. Never too close, never too far, just there. Ethan listens, his brow lowering slightly, not in concern, but in understanding, because he has seen that kind of behavior before, not random, not accidental, but guided by something deeper than instinct. "It was not following you," he says quietly, his eyes shifting once more to the dog, then back to her. "It was finding what it remembered." Clara lets that settle, her gaze softening as she looks down at the animal, resting beside them, and something inside her seems to ease, not disappear, but change, like a weight that has finally found its place. Outside the window, the last trace of daylight fades completely, replaced by the steady glow of streetlights, and inside, the cafe becomes a small island of warmth in a cooling world. Ethan reaches forward slowly, his hand resting near the tag, but not touching it this time, his voice steady, grounded. "He made sure it got here," he says, not as a guess, not as a question, but as something he knows without needing proof. Clara meets his eyes, and for the first time, a faint, quiet smile touches her expression, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to show that something inside her has shifted too, something that no longer needs to be carried alone, and in that stillness, with the dog resting peacefully between them and the memory of someone who is no longer there, but somehow still present. The moment does not end. It simply becomes something else, something quieter, something lasting, something that does not need to be explained to be understood. The night settles fully now, wrapping the cafe in a quiet that feels earned, not empty, and the soft glow from the hanging lights casts long shadows across the wooden floor, the kind that stretch and blend without sharp edges. Clara sits with her shoulders slightly more relaxed than before, her hands no longer guarding the tag, but resting near it, as if its presence has shifted from something she must protect into something she can finally share. Ethan watches the small movement without drawing attention to it, understanding that some changes are not meant to be spoken out loud. They are meant to be noticed, respected, and left undisturbed. The dog remains still at his side, its breathing slow and even, but its ears flick once toward the door as someone enters and then settles again. Always aware, always present. Clara glances at the window where the reflection of the streetlights now replaces the fading day, and for a moment her gaze lingers there, as if seeing something beyond the glass, something not bound by time or distance. He used to write letters, she says quietly, her voice carrying the kind of memory that has been held carefully over years. Ethan shifts slightly, his attention sharpening, not because he expects something, but because he recognizes the tone, the weight of what is about to be shared. Not often, not long once. Clara continues, her fingers brushing lightly against the table, tracing patterns only she understands, but every one of them said the same thing in different ways. She pauses, just long enough for the words to settle before continuing. That he trusted the people beside him more than anything else. Ethan exhales slowly, the memory landing somewhere deep, not painful, not easy, just real. That sounds like him. He replies, his voice softer. Now, less guarded. As if each word no longer needs to carry the armor it once did. Clara nods slightly, her eyes lowering to the tag again. The last letter came a week before. She stops, not finishing the sentence, not needing to, because some endings do not need to be named to be understood. The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It is respectful, the kind that holds space instead of filling it. The dog lifts its head again, just slightly, as if sensing the shift, and it moves closer to Clara this time, resting near her feet, creating a quiet triangle between them. Ethan notices and allows it, not claiming the dog, not directing it, just accepting the way it chooses to move, the way it connects. Clara's voice returns, steady, grounded. He said if anything ever happened, someone would carry a piece of him forward, she says, her eyes meeting Ethan's again. And there is no doubt there, no question, only recognition. I think he was right. Ethan looks at the tag once more, then at the dog, then back at Clara, and for the first time, something like clarity settles over him. Not sudden, not overwhelming, but firm, like a line drawn gently but permanently. He did not leave that to chance, he says, his tone quiet but certain, and the dog exhales softly, almost like an answer, almost like agreement. Outside, the night continues its steady rhythm, cars passing, lights glowing, the world moving forward as it always does, but inside, something has shifted, something has aligned, and in that alignment, without any declaration, without any need for resolution, a truth settles between them. Not loud, not dramatic, just present, like a quiet promise that has finally found its way home. The cafe grows quieter with each passing minute, the late hour gently easing the world into a slower rhythm, and Clara sits with her hands now resting openly on the table, the tag no longer hidden, no longer held close to her chest, but placed where it can be seen, where it belongs to something shared, not carried alone. Ethan studies it one more time, not searching for answers anymore, but acknowledging what it represents, and the dog remains still between them, its presence steady, its breathing calm, like a quiet witness to something that has already resolved itself in ways words cannot fully explain. Clara leans back slightly in her chair, her shoulders lowering as if a weight she has carried for years has finally found its place, not gone, but settled, and when she speaks again, her voice carries a softness that was not there before, not because she is weaker, but because she no longer needs to hold everything alone. I used to think I was holding on to it for him, she says, her eyes resting on the tag. But maybe I was holding on to it for myself. Ethan listens carefully, not interrupting, not offering anything to fill the space, because he understands that some realizations need room to breathe, the kind that arrive slowly and stay longer than anything said out loud. The dog shifts again, moving slightly closer to Clara's side, its head resting gently near her foot, as if responding not to the words, but to the feeling behind them, and Clara notices, her hand lowering just enough to brush the top of its head. A small, quiet gesture that feels natural now, not hesitant, not uncertain, just right. Ethan watches that moment with a calm expression, and something in him settles as well, something that has been searching without direction now finding a place to rest. He would not want it to stay still. Ethan says after a while, his voice low but clear. Clara looks up, meeting his eyes, and there is no resistance there, no question. Only understanding beginning to take shape. He would want it to move forward. Ethan continues, glancing briefly at the dog, then back at her, and the meaning does not need to be explained. Clara nods slowly, her fingers tightening just slightly before relaxing again, as if accepting something she has always known but never said. Outside, the night air deepens, and a faint reflection of the three of them appears in the window, blurred slightly by the glass, but clear enough to show the shape of what has formed, not just a meeting, not just a coincidence, but something connected, something intentional. The dog lifts its head again, looking first at Clara, then at Ethan, then settling back into place as if satisfied, as if the path it followed has reached the point it was meant to. Ethan reaches for his coffee again, taking a slow sip, and when he sets it down, his hand rests near the tag, not touching it, but close enough to show that he no longer sees it as something distant, something belonging to the past. Clara watches him, then glances once more at the dog, and in that quiet exchange of looks, something shifts again. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to feel, enough to know that what comes next will not be carried alone. And as the cafe hums softly around them and the night settles fully outside, the moment does not close. It opens, quietly, gently, like a door that has been waiting all along to be seen. The cafe begins to empty, chairs shifting softly against the floor, voices fading into the background one by one, until only a few quiet corners remain occupied. And Clara sits there with a stillness that no longer feels guarded, no longer feels like something she has to hold together, but something she is finally allowed to rest. The tag remains on the table between them, catching the soft light above, no longer a relic of loss, but a marker of something that endured. Ethan leans forward slightly, his forearms resting on the table now, closer than before, not closing distance out of urgency, but out of understanding, and the dog remains where it has settled, its body relaxed, its presence calm, as if the long path it walked has finally led it somewhere it can stay. Clara looks at the tag one last time, then gently lifts it, her fingers moving with quiet certainty as she loops the chain slowly around her hand, not to hide it, but to hold it in a new way, a way that no longer feels like carrying alone. Ethan watches her without speaking, because he understands that some endings are not spoken, they are felt, and when she finally looks up at him, there is something in her expression that was not there before, not relief, not closure, but something quieter, something steadier. "I think he knew," she says softly, her voice almost blending with the hum of the room, "that none of this would end with him." Ethan nods once, his gaze steady. "He always did," he replies, and there is no doubt in his tone, no hesitation, just truth. The dog lifts its head slightly, looking at Clara first, then at Ethan, then settles again, as if confirming what has already been decided without needing words. Outside, the streetlights glow steady against the night, the world continuing in its quiet rhythm, but inside, something has shifted in a way that does not need to be seen to be real. Clara rises slowly from her chair, the movement calm, deliberate, and the dog stands with her immediately, not commanded, not called, simply choosing. Ethan stands as well, not out of formality, but because something in the moment asks for it. And for a brief second, the three of them stand there in a quiet triangle of understanding, no longer strangers, no longer separate, just connected by something that neither time nor distance managed to erase. Clara glances once more at the door, then back at Ethan, and there is no question in her eyes, only recognition of what comes next, not defined, not promised, just possible. Ethan gives a small nod, not as an answer, but as an agreement to something unspoken, and as Clara turns toward the door, the dog steps forward beside her without hesitation, matching her pace exactly. Ethan follows a step behind, not leading, not guarding, simply walking with them. And as the door opens and the cool night air meets them again, the story does not end. It continues, quieter now, steadier, carried not by what was lost, but by what was found. And in that silence, in that simple act of walking forward together, something remains, something unseen but certain, like a promise that does not need to be spoken to be kept.